Hello, fellow rebel capitalists. Hope you're well. Before we get into today's video and the news, I want to go over why I have these pencils. I've seen a lot of people commenting on them saying it looks like McDonald's French fries. You need to get those off the screen. Doesn't make any sense. No, don't leave that in the comments. You're just showing your, I don't want to say ignorance. I think that's too harsh. I won't use that word. But I will say that you need to be joyous that we have the pencils. Why? Because this is a hat tip to the one and only Milton Friedman. And if you haven't watched Milton Friedman's video, it's on YouTube on how he describes the pencil as proof that we cannot have central planning, as proof that the best system is free market capitalism and a small government. He goes into a story of how a pencil is made, and this illustrates beautifully why the free market system is most efficient. And he points this out by showing that the central planners could never, ever make something as simple as a pencil. So we'll get into the video, but if you haven't checked out Milton Friedman, it's maybe 2 or 3 minutes how he goes into the story. It's absolutely wonderful. And he uses the pencil to illustrate his point. So that's why the pencils are there. Okay, let's dive into the story. This is big news, guys. The administration comes out for the rules for 100 million workers in the United States. Here are the details. And this is from NPR. Hopefully they're getting it right. And if this looks crazy, welcome to your future, Americans. Welcome to the new reality. I'm looking at this picture where there is a cerveza sickness testing mobile fleet that is going around and is there at the disposal of all of these businesses, so employees can run out there and get their test and get right back into work or be sent home. And who knows if they'll be fired or put on temporary leave or what will happen to them. So I guess from now on, we should just expect to see mobile testing units in front of every store or restaurant we go into. So next time you go to Target, you're going to see this. Next time you go to Walmart, next time you go to Home Depot, this is the new reality. So in early September, I'll go ahead and highlight this for you guys. The administration announced they were taking steps to get more Americans to obey, which is really what this boils down to. And I'd like to point out that in December of 2020, the administration, Joe Biden specifically, came out and told you, the American public, directly, that you do not have to worry about mandates. We're not doing that in the United States. And yet, what, 6 months later, now all of a sudden, he's mandating it for 100 million American workers effectively. I mean, come on. This is why you cannot trust the politicians. This is why I have that quote, and I say it over and over and over again, that if you think the politicians care about you, you are lying to yourself more than they lied to you to get your vote in the first place. It's a perfect example. I don't care if you're pro this, anti that. I don't really care what your position is on the medicine itself. You have to acknowledge the fact that we cannot trust our institutions. We cannot trust the government at all because they have lied constantly. They have contradicted themselves and they have never kept their word. So let's go over kind of the main talking points. The deadline they're setting is January 4th. And this is, let's read this here. I'll go ahead and highlight it. The first rule issued by OSHA covers entities with more than 100 employees, applying to an estimated 84 million workers. I don't know where they got the 100 million, but regardless, it's a large amount. Companies must ensure workers are either fully obey or they have a negative test for cerveza sickness at least once a week. And what we're doing for those who obey is we are giving them paid time off to be a good boy and girl. And what we're saying is employers don't need to pay for the testing. So if you choose to disobey, we are going to start punishing you. And here's where the smoking gun is shown by the administration. Or here they're showing the true colors. I think that's the way to say it. It's that the people who disobey, or the dissenting view, the people who choose not to inject a foreign substance into their body, they are going to have to be tested once a week. We talked about that. But then they're also going to have to wear masks while on the job. Okay. So the immediate pushback from someone who disapproves of this, like yours truly, would be, oh, well, they're keeping people safe. It's all about safety, George. It's all about health. You dumb rubes, you stupid idiots who value freedom, you libertarians, you're the ones that are so selfish that you're just going to go out there and get everyone sick. Therefore, we got to force you to do what we want because you're just not as intelligent as we are. And if you actually believed in science, then we wouldn't have to force you to go out and get the medicine. That's their position. But obviously, that position is very ill-informed, and it lacks even a small amount of critical thinking. Here's why. There's a tweet I sent out earlier. New Biden mandates require, like we just said, that group of Americans who choose to constantly be tested to wear masks. Let's take it another step, because this is a very nuanced topic. This forces someone who may have already had the cerveza sickness. And as you guys know, if they've already had the cerveza sickness, they have the exact same benefits that someone that has received the medicine, if not better benefits. So we're taking that individual, let's just use one person as an example, who has had the cerveza sickness. It has the exact same benefits to themselves and society, if you want to look at it that way, as someone who has obeyed and taken the medicine, plus this person who has the same benefit will be required to have a negative test weekly. So you've got someone that has the exact same benefit as someone who's chosen to get the medicine, plus they've tested negative. But on top of that, they have to wear a mask. Where the person who has received the medicine, they do not have to wear a mask. So what this shows us unequivocally is that this isn't about health. It's not about safety. It's definitely not about science. This is all about obedience. It's about usurping power, control, maybe profits, or all of the above. Because what they're basically saying is that if you disobey, but there's a minuscule chance that you not only have the cerveza sickness but can transmit it, well then we're still going to punish you by making your life hell by forcing you to wear a mask 8 hours a day. But for the people who obey, it doesn't even matter if they have the cerveza sickness. We're not even going to test them. And we're not even going to make them wear a mask. They can transmit the cerveza sickness as much as they want. We don't care. And the only difference between those two is that one is obeying and the other is not. See, this is the direction we're headed. Not only in the United States, but in the entire Western world, and unfortunately, in a lot of other countries. This push towards authoritarianism, this push towards constant conditioning of the population to do the will of the central planners. We're just seeing it over and over and over, and it's increasing in speed. This is something that I've talked about on this channel constantly. It's that foot in the front door theory, where they get you to do something small, and then it's something bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. First, they say you've got to get the medicine. And then they say, well, now that you've done that, we really need your teenagers to get the medicine as well. Then you comply. But yet you're still further coerced by the government, where they come out and say, okay, well, you've agreed to do that. You've agreed to get I know you really were a little apprehensive about the teenagers, but you went ahead and did that. So now what we need you to do is, if you have anyone in your family above the age of 5, 5 to 11-year-olds, then, you need to go ahead and inject that foreign substance into their body, even though it's only been around for maybe 6 months or so. But forget that. We just need you to obey. You see, and what I want to point out to so many people that may have a different view is this isn't about what's happening today. This is about what could be happening in the future if we continue to give the government this type of power and control over our lives. Because once you give up that freedom and liberty, you don't get it back. It's that line in the sand that you continually allow them to cross, and then that line just keeps moving further and further and further and further and further. That's what's happening right now as we speak. And again, I want to really highlight my point, and that's we should be scared. We should be very frightened. I'm trying not to use profanity. We should be very frightened about the direction of the world, but not just now, where this leads in 10 years, 15 years. Let's go back to the Supreme Court decision, 1905, with Jacobson versus Massachusetts. Remember that one? That's where they made the gentleman pay the fine for not wanting to receive the medicine back then. And everyone said, okay, this is great. This sets a precedence. Yeah, it did set a precedence, all right. It set a precedence for the Supreme Court decision they had in 1927, Buck versus Bell, where they forced sterilizations. They made that legal. They basically legalized eugenics. And they did that because of the decision in 1905. You see, a lot of people push back on social media, and I'm sure you guys get this all the time. And it's very weak thinking, and I'm using thinking very liberally. But they say, "Oh, well, what's the problem? Why should you be worried that you have to get a medicine? The government requires you to wear seatbelts," as though that's some sort of good rebuttal, as though that's and they treat that as though they're being clever, like that's just a mic drop moment, right? But obviously, it's a horrible comparison, but they're proving my point. You see, let's go back to the 1970s. Those of you who are alive, did we have seatbelt laws back then? I don't think so. Did we have helmet laws? Maybe in some states, not where I lived. And so my point there is those of you who are living in the 70s and remember back to that time, or maybe in the 60s, just think if they would have tried to implement these types of mandates back then. I can tell you, society would have given them the middle finger. They would have said, not just no, but hell no, we're not doing that. Why? Because there was an attitude, there was a more pervasive attitude towards freedom and liberty, or there was a more pervasive perceived value of freedom and liberty and individualism and privacy. I mean, I remember my parents saying this well, that whenever there would be something like that, they would just completely push back. And a lot of their friends and at the church group we were members of, everyone would always push back against the government. It was they didn't want them intruding on their personal space or in their lives at all. Zero. So you see, what's my point with the seatbelt laws is it's just this conditioning where once you agree to the seatbelt law, well, okay, now you're going to agree to the helmet law. And once you agree to that, well, now you're, as a society, much more receptive to agreeing to lockdowns. And then once you agree to that, you're more receptive to giving a foreign substance to your 3-year-old or your 5-year-old. And so whenever someone brings up a seatbelt law, they're proving my point. That's why we need to be scared as hell as to what's happening right now with our freedom and liberty, not just for today, but what the world may look like in 10, 15 years. Just like in 1905, we got the case that set the precedent for what happened 22 years later, where eugenics was legalized. So if we're agreeing as a society to these types of mandates today, what on earth will we agree to in 10 years, in 20 years? You see, that's a world that none of us want to live in. Even the people that are for or pro these mandates, because they're not thinking that through. They haven't read history. They don't understand the slippery slope this puts us on. So, and I really got off on a tangent there. So let's go over some quote unquote science, some actual real science. And this is from my good buddy Chris Martinson. And he just did a fantastic video on the science. And as you guys know, Chris really gets into the nitty gritty. He not only shows the reports and the studies that have been done regarding the medicines, what's happening with the cerveza sickness, but he goes into the nuance of this of each and every study and says, okay, it should be like this. This is good for this reason. This is bad for this reason. I mean, it's an incredible analysis. It's really what we need in what should be a debate in the United States, a good, healthy, uh, intellectually honest debate between professionals on one side of the table or the other. And this should all be made public. And then we should be able to choose based on our own decision making, not coercion. But my point here is Chris points out some recent studies that have shown that the people who obey are just as likely to spread the cerveza sickness as people who don't obey. And this is a couple studies here. And this is his most recent video. So if you haven't checked this out, you really need to. But my point is, let's go back to these regulations. You see, if it is true that the people who obey can spread it just as easily, and if they can't, why are they required? Why did the CDC come out and say that we need to wear masks again? Why? Because the viral load was identical with this new variant, and what that means is they can spread it just as easily. And one thing no one talks about is the fact that one of the benefits for the medicines is you don't have the symptoms, or you don't have as severe symptoms. Okay, well, if you don't have any symptoms and you have the same viral load, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be going to the party, you're going to be going to the grocery store, you're going to be going to your kids' school festivity. What are you going to be doing if you do have symptoms and you get the cerveza sickness? You're going to be at home in bed. So, who is most likely in this example to transmit the cerveza sickness when the viral loads are identical? You see, and this is what they don't talk about. But the one smoking gun that is always there is when they completely ignore natural immunity. And you'll notice through this entire list of new rules for these 100 million workers, natural immunity isn't discussed once. They don't even mention it. But yet it provides the exact same benefit, if not better. I mean, again, my main point here, and I just keep saying it over and over and over again. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but hopefully this is getting out to some people that haven't thought this through, is that these mandates just have nothing to do with health, everything to do about obedience and taking more power and control and micromanaging your daily life. That's really the bottom line. All right. Josh, do we have any? Okay, good. And the next video I'm doing, let's do something on. Okay, well, I'm going to do something on economics so I can actually speak my mind. And I don't have to micromanage my words. I mean, gosh, I can't stand doing these videos. I have to just stop myself after every single thought. And then I have to think, oh, how should I say this just so I don't get deplatformed? I mean, gosh, that's the world we're living in right now. Unbelievable. What's the super chat? Thoughts on some relaxation? Yeah, that's what I need right now. Some relaxation. Relaxation on med requirements. Oh, I see what he's saying. Cuban relaxed regulation for NBA team in Dallas and hockey team in Nashville too. Well, that's good. Yeah, that's good news. And I can go on and on and on about the walls are really closing in on those people, those rebel capitalists, those patriots that are out there that value freedom more than they value safety. But the good news is there are far more of us, people who believe in individualism, than there are people who believe in authoritarianism. And if Milton Friedman can move the needle in the 1970s, if Hayek can move the needle in the 1940s, if those East Germans, those brave, brave individuals that brought down the Berlin Wall in the early 90s, if they can do it then, we can do it today. And I know for a lot of you watching this video right now, you feel alone. You feel isolated. You feel as though you've lost hope, that you might as well comply because This is just the way the world is moving. And unfortunately, you're just going to have to deal with this for the rest of your life. But I want you to understand that we can win. We will win as long as we stick together as a community of patriots and rebel capitalists and break down the Berlin Wall that is being built around us today. That's the bottom line. All right. Is that it, Josh? All right. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, guys. Make sure you're always standing up, fighting for freedom, liberty, free market capitalism.